we are going to go through everything about the DLD apprenticeship that you might need to know. So we're going to look at an introduction to apprenticeships. We're going to go through the digital learning designer apprenticeship specifically. We're going to look at the benefits to an employer as well as to a learner. And then there's a Q&A session at the end with the apprentices themselves, so Amy and Joanne, and any questions you have for the providers. And we'll give you some contact details for them at the end as well. So I'm going to hand over now to the first section, which is the introduction to apprenticeships.
Thank you very much. Yes, so a quick whistle-stop tour of apprenticeships. One of the great things about apprenticeships is that it's aligned to your field of work. So when you come into a digital learning designer apprenticeship, you're essentially carrying out a key number of duties. And then during this time, you're able to build up those knowledge, skills, and behaviours that help you build up that full competency as a digital learning designer. Now, this is typically done with that off-the-job training. So every week, the apprentice will have 6 hours where they may be doing some online training. It'll be their coaching sessions, or it could be online sessions. And during this time, as they're learning those key knowledge, skills, and behaviours, they're then able to start transferring these over to the workplace and then start to build up those key competencies as a digital learning designer. I think one of the great things about the apprenticeship is that they are able to learn on the job, and it gives them a lot of hands-on experience. So things don't usually stay that abstract. They're able to get out into the workplace and start learning and applying straight away. And they can do this through kind of individual learning. It can also be like project work that they have. Also, when they come to see coaches, there's one-to-one sessions where you can really work on refining some of those skills. And also, another great part about it is, I'd say, is that community aspect as well, where you have lots of DLDs get together in workshops or online classes, and they're able to experiment and try things out, and then again, get back into the workplace and apply them. Along the way as well, we usually have master classes, so that's a real great opportunity where we kindly have some experts give up their time, and they have particular sessions on things like learning experience design, or it might be data analysis. And again, gives the apprentice a great opportunity to then go and learn a bit more about it and then try it out in the workplace. Typically, how they then get to the end of that apprenticeship is by getting to their qualification. So once they've built up all those competencies and they've learned about knowledge and skills and behaviours, they then get to their endpoint assessment. This is kind of like their final big work project where they'll think about a final output that they want to complete, something that's work-based, and then they will complete that over about 12 weeks. And then once that's done, hopefully, fingers crossed, it's all good for a pass, and they can say that they're fully a digital learning designer. Are we taking any questions at this point?
You certainly can do if you'd like to. Yeah.
Yeah, if anyone has any questions. Rob.
Hi, just a starting question. Have people got to be in a job first, as you know, as a learning technologist or in a role, or do they tend to find out about the apprenticeship and then they, you know, go through the role as an apprentice and then they get the job as a result of that? I'm guessing just what happens first, really.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I'd say learning technologist fits really well, actually, and Rob, you'll probably be able to expand on that just a little bit more, I think, in a bit more detail.
Yeah, sure. So I think what I'll do is I'll go on to the next slide about eligibilities around an apprenticeship. So yeah, I think this kind of leads on from your question, and thank you, Fraser, kind of for running through sort of a general overview of apprenticeships and how they work. In terms of who can be an apprentice, it works both ways. So a lot of businesses use it to bring in entry level and kind of any level kind of new talent into their teams, but also use it to upskill existing employees as well. So yes, they absolutely have to be in a role for them to do the apprenticeship. So whether that's kind of someone new coming in or obviously kind of an existing employee, the main thing about the apprenticeship is the work and the role, which I've highlighted on the second bullet point there. The role is ultimately the most important thing. Someone has to be in the right role to align with the apprenticeship standard. Interest in career aspirations, and obviously the person's drive and want to for their professional development and want to do the apprenticeship is key. But ultimately, they have to be in the right role for them to gain the qualification and align with the occupational duties within the standard. So in terms of they would need to be kind of already working within a role at that level, at a level 5, for them to align with the apprenticeship standard and go on to the apprenticeship. A quick touch on previous qualifications as well. So previous qualifications are if somebody does have already too much experience, prior learning, or a qualification within that field, that might make them ineligible for an apprenticeship. The good thing about Digital Learning Designer Level 5 is it's a fairly unique and brand new apprenticeship. So there aren't really too many formal qualifications there that align to the Digital Learning Designer standard. So, for example, where we've been delivering it for over a year now, we have lots of people at lots of different stages within their careers. That includes people from graphic design backgrounds, but also people from L&D backgrounds who have been in their role maybe for a number of years, but have all of a sudden digital learning and kind of e-learning and online remits within their role that they need to hit, especially kind of post-lockdown, I would say, where e-learning and online learning has become kind of a key part of their role. So it kind of comes from two areas, but they would need to not have a qualification kind of within that area, as they would need to be eligible. But as I said, the good thing about the Digital Learning Designer course is it's a fairly kind of unique qualification and unique course to have. So yeah, very, very rare that happens. But yeah, I think that's something to highlight. In terms of things around their job title and what they do, their age, as long as they're over the age of 16, anyone can be an apprentice. But the main thing is they have to be within the right role and doing the work that they need to do to align with the apprenticeship standard. I've used the term kind of tripod of a successful apprenticeship. I think there's 3 kind of elements that make an apprenticeship successful and a really nice apprenticeship journey, and that's kind of the apprentice and the drive and the want for the apprentice, the support from the line manager, and the support from the training provider. And I think those 3 are absolutely key in making sure that someone going on to the apprenticeship has a really journey, and they have the support from the line manager and the employer. The apprentice has the drive to do that, and the training provider is able to support them and get them through kind of their qualification and endpoint assessment. In terms of I guess how to hire and place an existing employee onto an apprenticeship or bring in someone new, I think the first thing you would need to understand is what your needs are and where your skills gaps are. That's really important. First thing to understand if you are looking to bring in apprentices or introduce apprenticeships into your teams and your business, is understand kind of where your skills are and where apprenticeships can help fill those skills gaps. Talk to the apprenticeships team within your business. Do you pay into the levy? Do you have apprentices within the business already? It's important for you to understand sort of how apprenticeships work if you do have them already kind of within your business. As I said earlier about support in place, it's really important that there is support for apprentices to do their apprenticeship whilst they're on program. So yeah, that support from not only kind of us or Crosby as a provider, but also as the business. So a line manager and the business as a whole would need to support and make sure that you're allowing the apprentice the time to do that hours off the job learning that they need to do as well. Talk to a training provider. So there's obviously 2 of us kind of on this call, but talk to us about all those things that I've mentioned before in that list. So we can help you understand sort of that skills gaps and how apprenticeships fit in and how you can introduce them. We can run through things like eligibilities and development plans, and that makes sure that they're in the right role and we're not placing them onto an apprenticeship where they're unable to kind of complete and put together projects and things like that. And then essentially it's about the registration processes and onboarding. So yes, there's kind of quite a lot of elements to help into your team, but as I said, kind of training providers can help you with that. But also there's a bit on your side as well to understand sort of where your skills gaps are and how apprenticeships might be able to fit into your team, into your department, and as your kind of your business as a whole. I think there was a question there maybe in the chat, sorry. Is there a minimum size of business? Is Is there a minimum size of business, number of employees? No, any size business can take on an apprenticeship. All that does is it differentiates businesses with an annual payroll of over £3 million into a levy business, and that means those businesses pay into the levy, which can only be spent on apprenticeship training costs. And then non-levy businesses, that apprenticeship training is subsidised 95% by the government. So non-levy businesses would only pay 5% of the training costs and training fees. I won't go into too much detail about the levy as there's quite a lot to learn and understand, but happy to kind of talk about levy and non-levy business sizes from there. But yes, any size business can take on that. And then over to Crosby.
Hi, right, sorry, I'm just sharing my camera here. So yeah, so sort of leading on from what Fraser and Rob has said, the exposure that the apprentice would get in their role is really key. The support, the commitments that are in place, really key as well from both the employer and the training provider. But ultimately, in terms of a digital learning designer, who we're looking for here, there are some typical job roles. But the important thing is not so much what they're called, it's what they do, what their aspirations are, what is going to be supported within their business for them to achieve. So they would work closely with colleagues to deliver high quality learning activities. They may use a range of tools, resources, platforms. They may not use them now at the very beginning of their program, but certainly that's the aspiration and what the programs are designed to give them access to, exposure to, practice, etc. So within our current cohort that we've got, where Joanne's joining us from today, we've got someone that's used PowerPoint, and that is the extent of it, right through to people that have done, as I think Rob mentioned, you know, graphic design backgrounds, numbers of years of creating e-learning, but there's still learning for them to do. There's still different things that they can try out. And of course, stuff changes, doesn't it? So with it, the typical time on the program is 2 years. Different training providers will have different programs structured in different ways, but always there to meet the standard. So there is a standard for the digital learning designer, which will include knowledge, skills and behaviours and those duties that were mentioned earlier. And every training provider's curriculum is about obviously providing an opportunity for learners to be able to evidence that in their endpoint assessment when they get to the end. Okay, so what else do we do here? So the types of things that they are going to be required to do. And at the beginning, so, you know, when an apprentice applies, they will do a skill scan, or they will assess themselves, and their line manager will support them to assess themselves against the actual standard, the knowledge, skills and behaviours. So we have a really good starting point. No matter what training provider, we need to understand that they're eligible. And eligibility also is about them having a significant skills gap. If we're going to be utilising those levy funds, we need to show that there is more value by that individual being on the programme and what they're going to learn about and be able to apply and do at the end of it than not. So the types of projects that we'd expect is that they would have those opportunities at some point during their programme, if not immediately, if they don't at the point where they join, to be able to consult and engage with stakeholders, to be able to gather information for data, have an evidence-based approach to it, to scope it out, to conduct learning needs analysis, really gather requirements, understand that they're going to be designing around dealing with the root cause, really, and not a symptom. They're going to have access to platforms, tools that can be configured, shaped, to be able to be to make use of emerging technologies, but also to achieve the best outcome for the role. So exposure to different types of methods of digital learning, but thinking about them in terms of what does this audience of learners need? What is the best delivery channel for them? There's an emphasis within this standard around project management, and also a little bit of facilitation in there as well, and ensuring that things are properly documented, reported on, again looking back to those stakeholders, communicating with them, keeping them satisfied, etc., as well, and staying on time and on plan in general with the work that's being done. So the apprenticeship standard is split into some knowledge themes and some skills themes. So the knowledge themes are around the context for it. So expect in there things like learning theories, multimedia design theories, a little around perhaps, you know, how the brain works, the taxonomies, some older theories, some newer thinking about that. Also the way that scripting and storyboard might happen, and how they can help you pitch within your organization. And this is completely relevant for any kind of employer, as long as they have evidence of the apprentice spending at least 50% of their time in England. So this could be public, private, third sector, where people are based here. Scoping, so is looking more about what do we need then? What are the project requirements? What are the how are we going to deliver this? What platforms? What tools? What happening when? How are we going to collaborate with different people? How are we going to make this happen? There's an element around improvement, so looking for continual development, understanding what the frameworks are that you're operating, so legislative and regulation frameworks that might be pertinent to your own sector or industry as well, but also certain, obviously, the legislation that relates to storing people's data, for example, privacy, how we ensure that what we are producing is accessible and non-discriminatory. And really importantly, looking at how we are going to demonstrate value and impact and a successful outcome through our digital learning design. So we're not just focusing on having the product at the end that we get out into the business and then leave and never go back to. We want to go back and check it, review it. Is it still current? Is it still valid? And is it doing what we need it to do? Communication, big piece around articulating concepts. Often you're maybe finding that you're trying to get across points of view for things where people have been used to face-to-face and it's all felt a bit more tangible. How you may put your designs, your strategies across to stakeholders to win them over. From a skill point of view, sorry, just popping back a slide, it sort of follows this model. So we've got the skills of being able to demonstrate that you can undertake analysis. You can find that information, you can analyze it, make decisions on it to inform your design, technical requirements, those side of things. Huge emphasis on actual design, the iterations of it, the different methods and models that you can use for instructional design, the development, the usability, the interfaces, the user experience that you're trying to get across. I mentioned before about things being accessible, things being fair, personalized, adaptive learning experiences, those kind of things we're looking at in there. Overall quality assurance, how to go about that, and also evaluation methodologies. Some older ones, some newer ones, thinking about how users are involved in the testing and to actually measuring the effectiveness of what you're doing. And then from an organization point of view, as well as the project management, it's thinking about how you record, how you manage your digital assets, how you ensure that you're complying and you're quality assuring your work in terms of it being current and valid, but also, you know, things like version control might come into there as well. Okay, Matt.
Cool. So yeah, just discussing the benefits to an employer. So Fraser and I are just going to run through these really quickly. I think it's important to highlight that there's benefits to an employer that cover apprenticeships in general, and specifically the digital learning designer apprenticeship as well. So obviously apprenticeships are cost effective, so they're levy funded, as I mentioned earlier. So all apprenticeship training costs are completely funded by the levy. The funding band for the digital learning designer apprenticeship just is £16,000, and that comes straight out of your levy pot for levy funded businesses. And as I said, that can only be spent on apprenticeship training. It fills skills gaps. So as I mentioned earlier, there's lots of different apprenticeships out there, and obviously the digital learning designer apprenticeship being so new and obviously growing quite rapidly across all businesses, especially kind of within higher education, is it helps fill skills gaps fairly quickly as well. It's an opportunity for staff career development. So you're giving your members of staff the opportunity to develop their careers. And again, that doesn't just include within digital learning designer, it covers all apprenticeships and all programs that are delivered. You're able to save with in-house digital learning designer development. So I know a lot of businesses outsource their digital learning designer programs and templates and things like that. What the digital learning designer apprenticeship does is it allows you to bring that all in-house. So it allows you to go on to my next point, scale your digital learning designer teams as well with the apprenticeship. And it allows you to scale it as well as kind of bring in that professional development element as well. Fraser, I don't know if you want to take the last few points.
Yeah, definitely. I've seen a lot of benefits, I think, over a year for the employer. I'll try and not oversell it too much, but no, honestly, it's an absolutely brilliant apprenticeship standard. And I think one of the things you find straight away, as and Helen touched on this previously, is that someone taking this apprenticeship is developing into a learning professional. And I've seen it happen where they look at existing course content and they're learning about new quality standards and professionalism, and they're, over time coming in and really raising the level of digital learning at the company, whether that's, shifting from that we just want to have a conveyor belt of content out into thinking about more nuanced designs that are helping with problems in the workplace, or really trying to bring up the aspirations of the learning at the company. So that's one of the huge benefits as well. And then it also helps with, in the company, you've got a source of professional guidance as well. They're able to help with that support and training and develop the program as well. And we mentioned before, one of those themes on the projects is about improvement. And this is a great one because it gives an apprentice that time and space to actually go and research trends and techniques, look at the latest advancements in the field, and actually then bring that into the workplace as well and try and implement it. So that, I find, is a real key benefit as well. And another topic that you'll find is particularly pertinent at the moment is inclusive and accessible design. And I find a lot of apprentices tackle this area as well, where they try to bring in accessibility guidelines to really try and raise those standards at the company as well, and make sure that they have an inclusive design covering all kind of challenges that you may have in the workplace. And it kind of ties in what I mentioned about innovation and experimentation with the opportunity to explore. One of the hot themes at the moment is AI, and I think as this apprenticeship standard launched, I think ChatGPT had just come out, and AI is everywhere at the moment, but it's certainly a part of the digital learning designer apprenticeship. And again, it gives apprentices that chance to explore and see how it fits in with their workflows as well. And kind of finally, it's bringing that person into a really well-rounded learning professional who draws on evidence bases and is able to advise and give recommendations on best practices for the company, to really make sure that their time and effort is being spent well on developing that digital learning. And then just generally of data security and privacy, there'll be an area that they can focus on here and really try and raise those standards as well, with how they keep privacy secure in this day and age with digital learning. And I think on the whole, there's just a lot of benefits that come through for the company.
Great, thanks, Fraser. I think the last slide we've got before the question and answers was this slide about benefits to a learner. So there are a plethora of benefits really for learners, and it crosses over really nicely with what Fraser and Rob were just saying about benefits to the employer. So there will be a little bit of crossover here. and sort of starting with that first one about feeling recognised or invested in by your employer, that's obviously key for individuals who want a chance for growth within their business, and lining in nicely with the second bullet point, supporting the fulfillment of their personal development plan. So making the personal development plan not just a mandatory thing that's in the calendar every year to create, but actually making sure that when somebody puts down on their personal development plan that they want to develop in something such as digital learning design, that they're able to do that. So the apprenticeship will completely fulfill those internal needs for employees to develop themselves and fulfill their own personal development plan that they write with you. There's obviously then the chance for career advancement with this particular apprenticeship standard, alluding to individuals developing in either instructional design, e-learning design, becoming an L&D specialist with a digital aspect to what they do, learning technologist, whatever it might be. There's a whole range of different job titles that individuals can go into after completing this apprenticeship, and will develop in. There's a massive chance to network within this apprenticeship, not only just the cohort that you're in, but also at events that are happening around the calendar, throughout the country, at different conferences, etc., that will all help with building up things like off-the-job training hours whilst on the program, in order to develop towards all of the KSBs, the knowledge, skills, and behaviours that are in the apprenticeship and that need to be developed whilst on program before entering endpoint assessment. The learners will receive a lead trainer as a mentor / guide to help them develop whilst on program, and they will get this a wonderful opportunity to learn from them as well as their fellow peers on the program. And at the same time, they will also be attending workshops, and I think Rob or Fraser used the term masterclasses earlier as well, within the programs to help develop in particular skill sets that they need to develop in. That then leads to peer-to-peer design collaboration. So individuals on the program will get a chance to see each other's designs and see how certain individuals tackle certain problems, how to develop e-learning or a digital learning asset for a particular scenario. And of course, this, as Hazel alluded to earlier in conversation, that everything within digital is fast-paced, is continuous, and continuously evolves. So there'll be the opportunity for individuals that do this apprenticeship to develop their capabilities in their use of new platforms and innovative tech and applications. The skills developed in this program are not just for one particular sector or one particular type of business. Everything that an individual learns in the digital learning design, with most forward-thinking companies, can be applied in a whole range of different sectors and business organizations. So it doesn't just have to be private, it can be, or it doesn't just have to be within education, it can be corporate, it can be non-profit. So most forward-thinking organizations will have an L&D arm, and hopefully, with us being in 2024, a digital aspect or a digital requirement within their L&D function. So everywhere you look online, on LinkedIn jobs, etc., there's always jobs going for instructional designers in a whole range of different sectors that require individuals to have those kind of digital skills and be able to curate digital learning. And the development that the learners go through on program is future-proofed, because we are continuously exploring innovative tech, getting one step ahead of a lot of people in the country by looking at all of this innovative tech and attending conferences and developing within new applications, whether that's an AI application or whether it's a non-AI based application that's new and comes to market. So in a digital age where everything is fast-paced, learners get an opportunity to be one step ahead. And then the final carrot to dangle is that, of course, this then leads to the ALT membership as an associate certified ALT membership through completing this apprenticeship standard. I think there were some questions coming in as I was speaking, but I think, Hazel, you may have answered that question. If there are any other questions off the back of that, please do ask those. But if not, I think we are now into the Q&A with apprentices, so it might all amalgamate and roll into one. Should we open the floor? If there are any questions for the Amy or Joanne on the call about their experiences within their apprenticeship so far?
Amy and Joanne, it would be really good if you could just do a brief intro about yourselves. And obviously, Amy, you're coming up to everything, and Joanne, you've recently joined the program, so you're both in really unique, in good positions to talk about kind of your different experiences. So, yeah, Amy and Joanne, it'd be really good if you could both give a little bit of an intro about yourself, and also just talk about what you've learned whilst you've been on the program, and kind of your next and things like that, and then we can get into the Q&A.
Yep, certainly. Am I okay to go, Amy? Are you?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, take the floor.
Yeah, so I currently work as a LMS specialist at Central Co-op. So previously I was in an L&D role, CIPD level 5 in learning and development, and then I moved into this role and it was much more digital based, so they supported me in enrolling onto this apprenticeship. I will say, I suppose, two things really. One thing that Fraser touched on about how it builds key competencies. I've been on only since October, and I can already see within myself, and I think my manager can, the improvements that has been made to our digital design, especially stakeholder engagement and doing things a bit differently to how we would have done before. So I suppose everything that we get from a piece of learning that we take away, you can immediately use within your role. And it is that tripod of success that Rob mentioned, in that my manager's really involved within the apprenticeship. So we look at what's coming up, and where what projects are coming up that will relate to the standard. And then with the support of Matt and Hazel, it's sort of, you build that apprentice and you start to build your portfolio. So I'm finding it a really supportive standard to do. Yeah, so it has been really good. Like I say, I think the one thing I like about it is just how you can put your learning immediately into practice. Do you want to go, Amy?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, so I work for Pearson TQ, and I've been on the apprenticeship for just over a year now, so I'm coming up to endpoint assessment in January, which essentially means I'm just about to finish and head off for final assessments. I was brought into work for Pearson basically to offer a fresh perspective to their content, and then when this apprenticeship started running, it kind of aligned with a bigger strategy for Pearson, which was to digitalise a lot of their learning material. But I think as my skills and knowledge have grown, my role has developed. So I take a much more active role now, actually telling senior people what to do in relation to digital learning. Accessibility has been a huge push for us, and basically making sure that none of the content gets complacent and it keeps up with digital trends and different learning needs. So embedding AI safely and appropriately, and making sure that we are actually recognising the different needs of learners Pearson work with. So we've recently initiated the Inclusivity Project, which essentially looks at all content. Starts off quite small, looking at things like font size that you do very early on in the digital learning programme, and now we're kind of up to a much more practical point. So creating practical scenarios that people can work through on digital platforms, and yeah, kind of just gone in and shaking it up a little bit. But I've only been able to do that because I now have the knowledge behind me to be able to point out not just what we should be doing, but why we should be doing it as well.
Cool, that's awesome. Thank you so much, Amy and Joanne, for joining and taking the time to join the call and talk about your journeys and your experiences on the program so far. I think for now, I think sort of the Q&A session may mesh into one for both Joanne and Amy and providers. So if anyone sort of did have any questions, either for Joanne or Amy, or for Fraser, myself, Hazel and Matt, please do let us know. I think there was one in the chat just now, perhaps, maybe.
Yeah, I was just answering it, but yeah, Rob, over to you. Rob Howe.
Yeah, thank you. I might as well just talk this one through. Thank you. So thank you very much to all of you, and particularly to Amy and Joanne for giving some richness of your experiences. In terms of my own particular area, so my employer already pays into the levy, so I guess I'm just confirming the cost. So would I pay the cost of the apprentice for 5 days of work per week? The apprentice then takes one of the days for training, which is fully funded, and then that repeats for 2 years. Is that the way that it will work?
Yeah, so what happens is, so if your employer pays into the levy, that training cost essentially, yes, will come straight out of that levy pot. That levy pot essentially can only be spent on apprenticeship training. So if that levy remains unspent, it essentially goes back to the Treasury, back to the government. So yeah, it could on apprenticeship training. Again, I won't go into too much detail about the levy. It's all very enthralling. So what, in terms of the time that someone would have to do on the apprenticeship and the time that kind of takes them away from their day-to-day work is, obviously it's called 6 hours off the job. It's a very confusing government terminology. It's technically on the job learning, but the government calls it 6 hours off the job learning. And essentially that can be split with a lot of the work that they do in the workplace will go towards that 6 hours off the job learning as well. And that will include kind of things that relate to their project. And again, that goes back to what Hazel, Matt, Fraser and myself have all been saying is the role is really, really key to making sure that they're eligible for the apprenticeship program. They have to be in the right role to align with the apprenticeship standard, to make sure that they're doing the work within the workplace that align and they're able to put together projects and go through the apprenticeship and gain the qualification. In terms of time, it can be kind of 2 hours on a Monday, 2 hours on a Wednesday, 2 hours on a Friday. It's fairly flexible. The only things that are fairly set are kind of more sort of cohort-led peer-to-peer learning. So things like learning sessions, masterclasses, development days, where they involve cohort, they tend to be set more in advance. But those one-to-one sessions with a skills coach, the individual learning, the project work, that's all fairly flexible in terms of how they implement that. So it's more how the apprentice likes to work, how the team like to work, how the line manager like to work, and how you differentiate that and distribute that around kind of with the 6 hours off the job learning. So yeah, try not to think of it as sort of 1 day a week is away from their desk just doing apprenticeship work. It's all kind of amalgamized together in terms of what they're doing day to day within their role as well. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, that's helpful. Be interesting to hear from maybe Joanne and Amy how that worked for you. So how did you sort of blend that into your working week? Did that sort of flow quite naturally? So you had like an hour one day where you potentially were working on a project and you thought, actually, I'll have a bit of training, to support me on this, and then I'll count that towards the apprenticeship hours. Is that the way that it will work for you?
Yeah, so I suppose it's working quite fluid for me. I mean, for attending the workshops and there's some pre-work and post-work, a lot of the work blends into your business as usual work. So for instance, I can do an activity that relates directly to my apprenticeship, but then it's something I then use within my day-to-day work. So it's almost like spending that little bit of time doing the research and gathering information for whatever task you're doing in the apprentice, then makes in the future wise you quicker doing your tasks in your day-to-day role. So I've not really felt I've done anything where I can't use it. So it's sort of all blended together, I suppose. So it's not felt like additional work.
Yeah, I had a slightly different approach at the start of the programme to I do now, where I'm much later in. So at the start, what I used to do was have sort of an afternoon a week dedicated solely to like developing my knowledge. So sort of quiet time where I wasn't being disturbed, where I could really kind of sink into what it was I was being asked to think about. But like Joanne says, once you feel comfortable in that space, it streamlines everything later down the line. So there's things that I can do now that probably take 10 minutes that I would have spent 4 hours doing at the beginning of the apprenticeship. And to be honest, now there's some things I don't even really consciously think about doing. I just kind of do them. My work is always project based, so I've always kind of taken quite a flexible approach to it. I'm looking at the calendar and saying there's 2 hours that I can dedicate towards this week. And I've never really sort of had a set structure, but that works for me and for my employer. And then kind of feeding into Andy's question there about has it impacted my usual workload? It does more so at the beginning, I found, just because there is more learning to be done. But the impact it's had is that I've now been able to get through my work a lot quicker. And I suppose I've had the benefit of having quite a lot of autonomy over my own schedule, but it hasn't been unbearable. It's not been unmanageable, and I have been able to more or less fit it into my usual working structure. It just takes a little bit of time to figure out what it needs to look like for you and for your employer, I would say.
Thanks, that's really helpful. I think it's more blended than I thought it was. I thought it was like sort of more chunked, and from what you've said, it definitely feels like it's more of a flow in the standard workflow that you'd be doing anyway. So that's helpful.
Yeah,
Thank
absolutely.
Yeah, I suppose it's sometimes
sorry. No, I'm just going to say it's recognizing at that point where I'm doing something, I'm deliberately going about it in a slightly different way on the back of something that I've just learnt about. I'm applying a different accessibility guideline or a standard or a different theory, and I'm being really deliberate about that because it's the first time I've been doing it in this way. And then eventually, as sort of Amy says, it becomes second nature. So that becomes business as usual, and then we wouldn't be expecting that to be classed as off the job hours because it's the flow of the work. It's what you do now. But it's when there's some deliberate working towards the building competence, towards the knowledge, skills and behaviours, that's all accumulatable as off the job. Sorry, Jo.
Yeah, I think I was just going to say the same. It's like we can be given a task. We can go off and do some research, but actually practicing that bit of learning, we're actually doing something that we're going to produce for work that's needed within the business. So that's sort of how it's starting to get blended, that you're really using the things that you're learning and researching.
Cool. Were there any more questions for anyone? Yes. Were there any more? Any more questions for Amy, Joanne, or Hazel, Matt, Fraser, or myself? I would take that silence as a no. Cool. So Fiona, I don't know if you wanted to close this one out.
Yeah, thanks very much, Rob. It's been such an interesting session, really, really, really valuable. So thank you so much to both Aldian and Crosby Training for along and helping us host this webinar, and a big thank you also to Amy and Joanne for sharing your experiences. I think that's really, really useful to anyone who's considering taking on an apprentice. It's been really, really interesting, so thank you so much. You'll see on the screen now 2 QR codes. Each of those will take you to the website for LDN and for Crosby, and I will send you the slides out as well as the recording of this webinar, so you will have those QR codes available to you on the slides. But yeah, if anyone has any questions, you can always reply back to the email that I'll send you later, and I can forward those on to our speakers for today. So yeah, once again, a big thank you to all of our presenters, and thank you very much.
Thanks, bye.
Brilliant.